The title of our presentation today is Neighbors Anonymous, Finding the Cure for Community. And the purpose of today's session is to give you a chance to have, to either revisit or hear for the first time some of the content that we shared at the conference in Atlanta. I think we have some really good, solid programming, and this is sort of a way to share it to a larger audience. Next month in August, we will have another Encore learning webinar that will focus on mentoring millennials. That'll take place on Thursday, August the 24th. If you received an invitation for this webinar, you will also receive one for that, but you may want to plop it on your calendar so that you make some time for it. Also, if you were not able to attend the conference, all of our content was captured and is available through recordings. NAAEI, our education institute here at the National Apartment Association, offers a package called Rewind, and you can learn more about it at naahq.org/rewind. Also, one more short commercial before we really dive in. I just wanted to announce that the 2018 conference will be in San Diego on June 13th through the 16th. I was just in San Diego for the last couple of days doing a site visit. It's a beautiful city. It has a ton to offer in terms of physical beauty, and I think that it'll be a great site for our conference, so you might want to plop that on the calendar as well. So today, they're not changing. Just a moment, please. It's my pleasure now to introduce our experts for today's webinar. We have Beth Tuttle, who's VP of Marketing at LMC, Jen Picotti, Chief Operating Officer at Manage Inc., and Kylie Hote, who's the VP of Client Relations at Apartment Life. Good afternoon, ladies.
Hello, Clark.
So I'm going to duck out of the video here, and I'm going to turn the controls over to Kylie, who will be our moderator for this afternoon. Hey there, Kylie. How's everything?
Fantastic. Thanks, Clark. We're so excited to be asked back for the Encore and to talk about this subject. We had a lot of fun at NAA, and we're excited to be able to tell a few more people about it. So, but why don't Beth, Jen, and I tell you a little bit about how we apply to the subject before we kind of kick it off. So as Clark said, I'm with Apartment Life, and one of the things that we really look at is about building community and building a culture of connectedness in apartment communities with residents. And so this is definitely something I'm very passionate about, and the stats that go with it. And so was real excited to be a part of this panel. So Beth, tell us about yourself.
Hi there, I'm Beth Tuttle, and I work for LMC. We are an apartment developer, we're a construction company, and we're a property management group. And we put a lot of focus on the resident experience at LMC. And so this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and really part of our property management team and model. So we're really excited to talk about it today.
Cool. Jen?
I'm the Chief Operating Officer with Manage Inc., and we are multifamily's first corporate social responsibility audit platform and consulting service. And so we spend a lot of time researching what's most important to employees, what's most important to your resident base, what's most important to the communities that you're operating within. So I'm excited to share data and work with these ladies to really dive into what matters most to the people who are supporting and providing service to and living in all of our communities.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, we'll kind of kick it off then. And so as Clark said, we're going to talk about Neighbors Anonymous, Finding the Cure for Community. There's a lot of research that's come out that really reveals how deeply our relationships and community connectedness are vital to our health and stability. So we're going to talk about today how this affects apartment owners and managers, and how it could be a key to really the evolving of the apartment product. So we really hope that will allow you guys to walk away with some takeaways on how to cultivate real neighborhood in your communities that will improve financials as well as the lives of your residents. So to kick it off, we at NAA, we did a poll. Today we're not really going to do a poll, but I thought it'd be fun to share the results of the poll that we did. And what we did to kind of get our brain and kind of the juices going around this topic, around just health and community and connectedness and how it's all related, was to talk about what, out of a list of 7 habits, what was going to help us live happier and healthier and longer. And so just to kind of give you an idea of what those 7 were, it was losing weight, reducing high blood pressure, breathing clean air, exercising, less heavy drinking, quitting smoking, as well as social integration. And so as you thought about those 7 items, what we wanted to see is kind of how would you rate that? What would be the thing that you would pick that you believed would help you live a longer, happier, healthier life? And what our NAA attendees said was about 3% said quitting smoking would help. 0 said less on the heavy drinking, which I just came back from Italy, so I would probably say that might be top of my list at this point. 26% said social integration. 2% said reducing your high blood pressure. 20% said losing weight. And then 47%, which really was the most popular one, was exercising, which I think makes total sense. It's probably, not knowing the facts and reading all the studies, that's probably what I would have probably picked in the beginning. So as you can see up on the screen, this is how it came out from research. So research said that the #1 indicator based on all the research they've done was that social integration was going to impact how a person lives longer, happier, and healthier. And so that really causes us to kind of take a step back and really think about how does our connectedness, how does culture really connect to how we stay healthy and how we do life better. In a book called Village Effect, what it said is that those that were integrated into communities had half the risk of dying as those that lived solitary lives. And so again, I just want to go gain friends just for that one stat right there. So if I can live a little bit longer. And so we can see that it's really important. So as we move on and really kind of look at how to live long and happy lives, there's a study. And so we can move the slide forward. And so as we look at that at a study, it was by Harvard. And what it did is it followed a group of men for over 75 years. What it watched them from all types of life experiences, right? From going to college, to getting married, to getting their first job, to divorces, to sicknesses, to deaths, to additional marriages, like all kinds of things. It really followed them through all their different life experiences. But what they began to see as the common themes, the 2 most popular things that helped them see how these men that were living the longest and the healthiest and were the happiest were 2 things. It was 1, close relationships, and 2, quality relationships, not quantity. And so what they saw under close relationships was that these men that were in both of the groups that they were studying in the Harvard study they reported that those that were living longer and happier were closer to their family and friends. Their community tended to be happier and healthier than less than the social counterparts that weren't doing as well. They were living longer, and they were happier. And so it just really showed that it was boiling down to a lot of them had the same things happening in their lives, whether it was sickness or stresses, job losses, things like that. But what they really saw the correlation to was the fact of the community that they had surrounded them with and the health of it. The second thing was the quality of relationships and not quantity. And so just, talking about, it's not just about being in a relationship that matters. It was really talking about, it wasn't how many of it was. It was really talking about the quality of it. It even talked about how married couples who said they argued constantly and had a low affection for one another, they weren't living long and happier as those that were even single and maybe didn't have a significant other. They were happier and healthier. So it just kind of shows you it's not necessarily even just it's about that quality and not just how many. What that did, that kind of reminded me of a conversation that I had with my son a while back, and he was talking about just kind of how many friends I had on Facebook, you know, and I thought, gosh, I don't know, I'll have to look, and I had about 800 friends, I think, I don't know. And he was like, oh my gosh, that's crazy, you know, 800 people, Mom, you know, and I was like, oh, well, it caused me to kind of take a step back and really think about that quality versus quantity, and who were acquaintances and who were friends, and to really kind of think about that. But at the end of the day, what this study showed was that over and over, time after time, as they studied these men in the different places of life, it just showed that they fared best where the people really leaned into the relationships of friends and their community. And, you know, and really what that leads to as we look at just kind of the history of our, you know, even as just the U.S. and how we define culture and connectedness. There's a book called Bowling Alone by Putnam, and what he saw was that, and what he studied was, he took a look at back in the 50s, how many people were on bowling leagues. And what they began to see is that over time, and they looked into really like the early 1990s and early 2000s, is what they saw is that there were more people bowling, but there were less leagues. And so that really caused them to kind of take a look at, which is the next slide that talks about just really that decline of social connectedness. And what they began to see is that the neighborhood relationships had a decline of 50% over 50 years. And so it just kind of takes you to take a step back and think about, even from looking at the stats, that 1% of the population lived alone in 1920. So 1%, people were living together, families were living together, they were doing life together. Now again, technology and evolution of what we have and abilities to get around definitely impact that, because by 2010, it had risen to 10%. So over 40 years alone, 300% was really that increase of how many more people were living alone and not doing life with each other. And again, a lot of things predict that from technology and transportation and things like that. But, you know, I think just over time, what we noticed is that over the 20th, you know, as we look over, you know, this 20th century, is that there's been a tide of just a slow movement of us, and a silent without warning of just us really pulling apart from each other, and really not connecting with each other. And so, so from that perspective, it just causes us to kind of take a step back and really think about, how do we build connectedness? This is so important. If stats are showing that it impacts our health and our well-being and our longevity, then what do we do about that? What does that look like? On the next slide, it talks about just even when you think about Starbucks and the culture that they've created. You know, one of the Howard Schultz's famous quotes, of course, that you see on the screen, is that, you know, they're not in the coffee business serving people, but they're in the people business serving coffee. And so as we think about the communities and about the multifamily industry, is that, I mean, we're in the people business. And so what do we need to do to really pour in and build a business that really talks about meeting the needs of our residents and building into theirs, and really impacting their lives while making it profitable for our communities. So I'm going to pass it over to Jen to allow her to tell us some stats and facts around what she's seen in the industry.
Thanks, Kylie. You know, it really is pretty amazing to think about, you know, just this stat of meeting with friends is going to have an increase on how long you live. That kind of thing is really pretty phenomenal. And if we're looking at the trends in the industry, we're seeing that the balance are tipping as far as what impact the neighbors have. So on one side of the scale, so we can see in the next slide, on one side of the scale, we see that now more than ever, we're seeing an increase in lease breaks. And the reason is neighbors. Neighbors is now in the top 5 reasons for a resident choosing not to renew their lease. Now, it was interesting, Apartment Ratings about a year ago, they did a one-day survey, one-question survey. So anyone who went onto apartmentratings.com that day, they would be asked the question, within the past 12 months, have you broken your lease due to an unresolved issue with a neighbor? And I was expecting that maybe, you know, 4 or 5% would say yes. We saw 12%. 12% said yes, in the past 12 months, I have broken my lease due to an unresolved issue with a neighbor, which to me was absolutely shocking. I expected a little bit, but more than 1 out of 10 was pretty mind-blowing to me. Now, on the other side of the scale, neighbors is now the number 2 renewal driver. It's the number 2 reason why they say, yeah, I am going to stay here. I'm not going to go somewhere else. And also within those top 5 drivers of staying and renewing your lease is due to community events. Now, the reason this is so significant, you know, in my prior life, I was working with Satisfax, and this is something that they have been monitoring for a number of years, at least 15 years. And so when it came to neighbors being a renewal driver, well, out of a list of 30 to 40 items, neighbors was always at the bottom of the list, like totally bottom of the list. And community events was typically, you know, number 20, number 30 as far as a driver. And suddenly, beginning in 2016, it's now suddenly in the top 5, both of those things. So we're really starting to look at relationships with a new set of eyes and seeing how that really impacts things. So next, we want to show you something fun that kind of underscores the importance of that whole unresolved issue with neighbors.
Okay, I'm going to give this a try. We played it from another desktop, but let's see if it works, okay?
All right, thanks, Clark.
So what does being an upstairs neighbor mean to you?
It means we make sound.
People think of neighborly noise as a nuisance, but we think of it as an art form.
We want the sounds to be different, but completely unrecognizable.
Mm-hmm. It just sounds like bowling balls. That can't be what it is, but that's what it sounds like. It sounds like bowling balls. Is it a bowling ball? Is it a metal barrel? You never know, because sometimes we get metal barrels.
You knew we were twisted, though. Julia is a fountain of creativity.
Oh.
She's a genius.
Oh.
She's so creative.
Oh.
Their ceiling is our stage, and we're dancing across it.
Yeah.
It is work. You know, we often take shifts to create the illusion that nobody here sleeps.
I just want them to stop, and I want to know what the hell they're doing.
Oh, love to feel your body all around me. Oh. See, she thinks that we're having sex, but things aren't always what they appear to be.
Oh, yeah. When we do have sex, it's actually very quiet. It sounds like a baby the size of a giant is learning how to walk.
A floor is but a movie screen to project the mind's eye.
And all of that hard work really pays off when we get to meet our family. There's a lot of noise going on up here. It kind of sounds like...
Sounds tough.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yep. Be well.
Thank you.
You know, some people might say what we do is passive aggressive.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So great. So we've heard these complaints, right? You know, where it's like, oh my gosh, it sounds like there's an elephant upstairs, or it sounds like there's like a strip club upstairs for me. What is going on? But what this really comes down to is the fact that if we have so many people, so many residents who have specifically broken a lease due to unresolved neighbor issues, there are some things that we can do from a property management perspective. Because when they sign a lease, when any of us signs a lease, there is language almost 100% of the time in any lease that says, you know, our quiet hours are from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. or whatever it might be. You're not allowed to repair cars in your driveway or carport. There are these things that are laid out, and everyone who lives in our community, they sign that lease. So when I'm a resident and there is a late night party going on and I call the office or I call courtesy patrol or whoever it is, and I say, hey, these guys are throwing a party, it's 1 a.m., you know, I need some help here. If the response to me is, well, we need you to call the police. Okay, so now I'm enforcing your rules. Why is that okay? And so putting yourself in the resident's perspective, we have to understand that we've all agreed to these rules, and so the resident is looking to the staff to uphold those rules and have teeth as consequences of some kind. So one of the things that you can do, make sure that your entire team knows your lease really well. They know what everyone has agreed to. Define your process for solving problems. You know, if there are noise issues, if there are, you know, people are repairing cars in the parking spaces, or whatever the issues are, define your process of how you're going to investigate it, how you're going to resolve it, and what you're going to do if the person who is the offender doesn't fix it. What are you going to do? Be quick, be consistent, because that really sends a message to let everyone in the community know, hey, we have rules, we have them for a reason, it's for your quality of life, and your quality of life is really valuable to us, and we're going to be consistent about responding to these types of issues, and we're going to be fair, and it's going to be the same for everybody. Know it, there's not an exception for anyone. So that's a big impact, and by having those rules, it actually makes the neighbor process and being able to respect and connect with each other much, much easier. I'm going to turn it over to Beth. She's got some great data on how important this has been within their portfolio of the neighbor issue and how to connect people.
Hey guys, Jen, are you going to progress the slides for me?
Actually, I'm here for you, Beth. Just you can like give me a hand signal or say next slide, and I'll
okay,
help
cool.
you.
Thanks, Clark. Thank you.
Okay.
Hey guys. Okay, so we did a survey of all of our residents, which is really only about 4,000 people, but we found the results to be really telling. Overall, we had great scores, and we were really pleased with the results. But what we were really trying to determine with this survey is, you know, if people feel like they're a part of our community, and the different factors that go along with that to help them feel like more of the community, or things that are preventing them from feeling like part of the community. And my slide looks a little weird here, so forgive me, I'll read these off to you. So we broke them down into two categories once we had the results, and we kind of broke it out for people that were newer to, or people who moved in the early stages of a lease up, and people that moved in later on in the lease up. The first question was, how satisfied are you with your sense of belonging within the apartment community? And we felt like we scored really well on this one, because a lot of our residents move from out of state, out of country, they're new to a neighborhood, they've moved for a job or to try out a new area, and to have them feel like they're at least, you know, 80% connected in the community from such an early start, we felt like that was a big win for us. The next question was, how satisfied are you with your community-sponsored events? And we scored really well on that one as well. We got a 4 out of 5. So I think part of that goes into how we're determining what events to host, and how we notify people and get people engaged in those events. So at LMC, we use a couple of different ways to communicate to our residents, because we know that they all prefer their messaging differently. So we send emails, we utilize our social media pages. We also have active building on most of our communities, which some of you may have similar ways to communicate. So we post these announcements for the events on all of those different mediums. And then we also ask residents what they like to do. We ask them what kind of events they want to participate in. So of course, if they say, hey, you know what, I really like some CrossFit workout, and then we host a CrossFit event, they're going to be super happy that not only we care about their opinion, we listen to their opinion, and then we host an event that they love. So we feel like that score was stellar. We're very pleased with it. Of course, there's room for improvement. There always is. But we're going to continue on the path that we're going on to try to keep that going up. The next question was, how satisfied are you with your ability to participate in socially responsible events and activities in your apartment community? We scored well on this one as well. So I think that our residents probably into this question whatever they felt was socially responsible. So at some of our communities, that may mean that the community participated in a 5K, which we've done before, where our leasing team would sponsor the 5K. We would have matching shirts, and we would encourage residents to participate with us. So we're building community. We're doing an event together. We're appealing to our, fitness-centric audience, but then we're also giving back to the community. We're engaged in the community and we're giving back to a good cause. Other people may consider something like a gardening club socially responsible. So at some of our communities, we have community gardens where residents can go and plant their own things, or we can plant things and they can come out and enjoy them. So it may be herbs or, tomatoes, whatever is good in the garden. And we noticed that some of our residents were starting their own gardening clubs. We hadn't even initiated it. But once we see that, we're like, hey, we got to make this gardening club a thing. So even though some people may not consider that socially responsible, it's where it's an event where they're giving back to their community, right? They're maybe sharing their vegetables with another resident, and they're going green, and they're growing something in their apartment. So it's really cool. The next question was, how satisfied are you with your relationship with other residents in this apartment community? So this one scored a little bit lower, and that's really important to us. We want to make sure that that is our highest scoring for a number of reasons. So we've always trained our leasing teams to relate to our residents and to build rapport with our residents from the get-go. But now we're trying to help our residents to build rapport with other residents. From a marketing perspective, there's a lot of value in that because when you are able to develop those relationships and help people get connected, like Kylie mentioned earlier, they're more likely to stay, right? So that's an easy one. You're reducing turnover. In addition, you're also creating brand advocates, right? So I joke that my husband is still friends with some people that we lived in an apartment near 7 years ago because they would hang out at the dog park and our dogs were dog friends. And so you're building those lasting relationships that don't seem like that big of a deal. It's just people that hang out in a dog park, but it's hard to move away from those people, right? Because you have that dog park experience that you love, and you know that when you're taking your dog out, you can just call Michael and say, hey, I'm going to hang out at the dog park for an hour. You want to come sit with me? So that's really important. It helps to create those relationships, but also builds a brand advocate, because then that person's saying, man, I love the residents here. Maybe it's on social. Maybe it's just to their friends. Maybe it's with their coworkers. But you have a brand advocate talking about how awesome the community is at your building, right? The most important reason why we want to really ramp up that relationship building is something that I learned from my boss, Joanne Blaylock, and she calls it the spaghetti effect. So if somebody that you really like spills a bowl of spaghetti in your lap, you're like, man, you just spilled spaghetti in my lap, right? No big deal, you wipe off the spaghetti. But if somebody that you don't have a relationship with spills that same exact spaghetti in your lap, I mean, you're so irate, right? Like, how dare that person spill spaghetti in my lap? Well, it's the same thing with our residents, right? If they know their neighbor upstairs and they're loud, they're like, man, that could be Beth. She is having people over again. They had too much wine. I'm going to call her and tell her to tone it down. But if they don't know that upstairs neighbor, they're going to be pissed. So they're going to call the police. They're going to call the office. They're going to want something done and evicted, all of these things. So in creating those relationships and making sure that your residents feel connected to their neighbors, you're preventing you having to respond to those noise complaints. And you're probably preventing some noise complaints because that upstairs neighbor is going to feel bad about making so much noise. And in addition to that, you're just cutting down, oh, sorry, people always come in my office. I even put a sign on the door this time, it doesn't matter. Hi, Rebecca. Okay, so I got a special delivery, great news. Okay, so building those relationships between your residents is going to save you time and effort, which also boils down to man hours. Can you forward the slide for me, Clark? Awesome. Okay, so the next question was, on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being very likely and 1 being very unlikely, rate the following. So on how likely are you to renew your lease based on your relationship with the community, staff, and associates? we scored 3.5, which I feel like is a huge win for us. So our community, or our portfolio, is all brand new communities. It's all new construction. All of our residents moved in because they love a brand new community. So those residents, that resident base, is less likely to renew as a whole. They tend to move from the newest thing to the next newest thing. So the fact that we scored a 3.5, I feel really good about it. Like, that means that our teams are developing relationships, and even though these people love brand new apartments, they're considering staying because they love our team so much. So I feel great about that. How likely are you to renew your lease based on your relationship with neighbors? So this one makes me a little nervous since Jen said it was so important. We only scored a little over a 3 on that one. So we have some work to do on building those relationships first and making sure they feel plugged into that community. And then the last question was, how likely are you to renew your lease based on your community-sponsored events and activities? So we got a 3.2 on this one, and I think there are several factors that go into this score. I think that we're doing a great job of hosting regular events, and we'll talk more about those later. But I think that maybe some of our residents aren't interested in that. So we have this one set of residents who love and they love coming to the things, they love meeting their neighbors, but then we also have these other people that aren't really that interested and they don't want to participate. And that was some of the comments that we got back on the survey. It was just like, hey, you know, I just come home to sleep and then I go back out. So that's fine too. But overall, we feel pretty good about this one. You can see a lot of people skipped this question too. So I thought that was pretty funny. 714 answered, but I mean, a third of those skipped this question. So if you can progress to the next slide.
All right. So originally when we did this session at NAA, we had Rick Graff, who's the president of PINNACLE, participating, and he conducted the same survey that Beth did at LMC. He conducted it at PINNACLE and wanted to kind of see the differences, the similarities, etc. So while Beth was really looking at the difference between residents who moved in toward the beginning of the lease up and residents who moved in a little bit later, Rick was curious into looking at the different classes of buildings that he had within his portfolio. And so when he looked at questions such as how satisfied are you with your sense of belonging within your community, I think he expected to see that it was pretty similar across the board. And as you can see, to the far right, you've got the affordable part of the portfolio, and 52%, over half, said, yeah, I am very satisfied. I'm highly satisfied with my sense of belonging. Class A came in second place, nearly 50%, and Class B and C a little bit lower. So it was interesting, and when you think about these different types of portfolios, you have the Class A where they expect a lot, they're paying more, so they expect more. You have your affordable group where they're in similar situations, they've got to jump through a lot of hoops in some cases to be able to qualify to get into this particular home, and so it has a certain sense of importance to be able to get what they need in this particular community. And so once they're in, they're like, yes, all right, I've jumped through all the hoops, I've filled out all the paperwork, I'm in, I can relax for a little bit. But that Class B and C, they might be feeling maybe a little bit neglected. Maybe we feel that we don't have to do quite as much. So it was an interesting result. If we look at the next slide, the question is, how satisfied are you with your relationship with your neighbors? What was interesting to me was, while the affordable part didn't surprise me as much, Class A results surprised me, because typically I think, you know, with Class A, they might be higher earners, which means they might be working more hours. But when you look at their relationship with the community staff, you can see that that is important. They are expecting that high level of interaction. They want that response. They want that ability to get a hold of the person they need to get a hold of. And it's very likely that they will renew based on that relationship. Again, Class B and C, a little bit lower. You know, are we applying the same level of customer service to every community in our portfolio? So it's an interesting thing to take a look at. If we look at the next one, The importance of relationship with your neighbors in determining this. So looking at the importance side of this. On the affordable side, that relationship with their neighbors is very important. There is that strong sense of community, but we can see that class A, B, and C are all kind of along the same. They're pretty neutral there. So what does that tell us overall? I think one of the things that we have to look at is connectedness, and I think Kylie can address this and show where we need to focus attention in these areas. So Clark, you can go ahead and advance us. There we go. Oh, I'm not hearing Kylie. Is everyone,
Kylie,
anyone
I
else?
think you're muted.
I'm here.
There you go.
Sorry, guys. Yeah, so, as we heard from Beth and as we heard from Jen on behalf of Pinnacle, that just what residents are saying, that they're valuing community, they're valuing connectedness, they're valuing their neighbors, whether it's good or bad, as well as the staff and how they relate to them. And one of the things that I think is really interesting is Ron Witten with Witten Advisors, he's an advisor within the multifamily industry on buying, selling, cap rates, you name it. He did his own research and he released some data that covered this very topic. And what he found, as you can see in this graph, is that over half of your residents, 53% of residents living in a community, had zero friends living there, zero friends. So I'm an extrovert, so that makes me really sad. But maybe for our introverts, they're like, hey, that makes me pretty happy. But at the end of the day, like as you think about that and kind of a little bit about what Beth talked about staying connected with the people that they knew in one of their first communities they lived in, and just we moved many a time because of that connectedness. And so what he did then is he took that data one step further. And on the next slide, it shows the correlation between how many friends you have in a community to the intent to renew. And so what this shows is that if in that 53% that said they had zero friends, their likelihood to renew was 29%. But as you can see, as their friendships grew in that community, so did their likelihood to renew. And as they got up to 7 or more friends, their likelihood to renew and that intent almost doubled. And one of the other interesting additional data that shows is that there's a 3 times greater return when you're moving a customer from highly satisfied to emotionally connected versus really focusing on from that dissatisfied to highly satisfied. So, when you think about, okay, what's the difference between that highly satisfied and emotionally connected? Many things that make someone emotionally connected, many times are at that subconscious level. And so a lot of times they're not fully aware of those needs. Some people even like just knowing that these in their community, or that they know that they have someone above them that they could at least go grab butter from, or if there was an emergency. And so, people really in the neighborhood like this, even if they're marginally involved. And so I think what we've learned is that it's not only important that we help our residents, being happy and healthier, but we know that it is a better business decision. So if we have them connected and they've got friends in that community and they're living a happy, healthier life, it's, the data showing, and especially what even Jen talked about earlier, and just some of those changes and movements on that intent to renew, that these things matter to them. So we're just to move on to that the next topic is just, as we mentioned at the beginning, of just how does this impact the evolution of the apartment product? And so you can advance it to that next slide, and we'll talk a little bit about just the graphic that we see here. And what you see is that, as the multifamily industry, we do a really great job at building these communities and making them have all these incredible services and amenities that really match as our resident profile has evolved. But what we're seeing is there's possibly when you look at this data, there's possibly a whole new category that's really wholly distinct from physical features and services. And you can click it one more time, Clark, I think the next one I'll do. So when you think about what we've talked about and just some of the stats and things that are important, what we begin to see is community is not focused in just those physical features, but or services, but even more so in the relationship. And so with community, the relationships really shift as being that supplier customer to really that neighbor to neighbor. And the residents themselves, they become a powerful amenity for you. And while these features and services are relatively expensive to create, and we hope that our residents are going to take part in it, when you think about just the whole neighbor to neighbor aspect and the community, delivering community, it's expensive, and it really has a longer lasting. While the objective of features and services is to appeal and satisfy, the objective of community is to really serve those residents. So again, just into really the value of that community and the return on investment there. So when you think about just, a place that you live, what comes to mind? Is it, what memory? Was it a friend because you moved there? Was it a family member? As you think about that, you really begin to determine, what is it that was important to you? And it can really begin to help shape on how to really use those neighbors as a positive amenity and really sell what culture you're creating in your community. So I'll pass it to Jen to talk a little bit more about strategies.
It is interesting when you think about the apartment product, because when you think about a community, there are basics. A 2-bedroom has 2 bedrooms. It might have 1 or 2 bathrooms. It'll have a kitchen. Like the things that it has in it, they're differentiated maybe just by how they look, the aesthetics of it. Services can be very similar. But when it comes to friends and neighbors and community, in this day and age, this is what's really going to differentiate them. And that brings us to the whole topic of who our audience is. And a big part of that right now, and I know you have heard so much about it, some of you are probably sick to death of this topic, but we have to talk about millennials. And so if we can go to the next slide, some of the things that we know about millennials, and this is going to be our largest renting base. These are the ones who are moving into our communities. They're also the people that we're recruiting to work within our communities. So we need to understand a few certain things about them. First of all, 70% of them are activists, meaning that they participate in things that they care about. They will make decisions about where they're going to live, where they're going to school, what businesses they're going to frequent, where they're going to work, based on how that organization participates in the world. And are they doing things that young person cares about? Now, the other thing about them is that when they make decisions, they have no problem voting with their dollars. So 33% of them will either boycott or support something because they have a strong opinion about it. They have a strong opinion about what that business is doing or not doing. Now, what's interesting, we talk about millennials, but remember that the original activists are our baby boomers, and that's our second biggest group of renters. It's also our second biggest group of workers. Maybe it's our current career, or maybe it's a secondary career, but they were the original activists. And I think that seeing the millennials and how they're voting with their dollars, voting with their time, it's inspiring the other generations to be like, oh yeah, I can make a difference, I can make an impact. And so we don't want to forget the other generations. So when you're thinking about community events, there are some things to take into consideration. Look at things that are going to draw people in and are going to play to the things that people care about. Maybe it's a new experience. People have very little time. They've got a lot going on. They have very little time. And so if you can offer them a new experience, something that they wanted to try, maybe it's a cooking class. Now, Kylie, didn't you get to do a cooking class in Italy?
Yeah, I did.
People are making decisions about where they travel, where they live, what they're doing based on new experiences they can have. So whether it's a cooking class, a wine and painting class, a food pairing class, maybe it's understanding finances. It can be a whole lot of different things. You can support enthusiasts. Beth talked about community gardens, and some of it was intentional. We're providing community garden space, but some of it was completely organic in the sense that residents were like, hey, we all have this interest, let's have a garden club. The Bark Park, we all know, if you've ever been to a Bark Park, if you're like me, you know the names of all the dogs first, before you know the names of the owners, it's like, oh, there's Murphy's mom, and then you start to develop the relationships. So play into those kinds of enthusiasts, whether it's a knitting club, a scrapbooking club. Those types of interests are things that, to Kylie's point earlier, they cost very little money in a lot of cases. You just provide the space, you provide a date and time, and say, come on and let's do this. A team event, like doing those fundraising walks or those fundraising 5Ks, doing things like putting together school kid or foster kid backpacks for kids who might not be able to afford, school supplies and things like that. School's starting soon. Some places it started already. Can make a significant impact, and people can participate in a way. Maybe they're donating the supplies. Maybe they're the ones who are packing up the backpacks. Maybe they're the ones who are driving the backpacks over to the drop-off location. But having things that people can participate in a variety of ways, whatever makes them sense or the way that feels best to them. And then don't forget about people's competitive spirits, the chili cook-offs, the barbecue cook-offs, pie eating contests, pie making contests, pet parades, all of these types of things. People like to be able to show off what they can do, get the attention for their skill, their talent, their creativity. Those types of things can really have a lot of impact. The other thing you've got to remember is that when you're putting community events together, you saw earlier the impact that the relationship with staff has on residents and their intent to renew. Your team has to be the starting point for all of the relationships. I think about a year ago, I just moved back to my hometown, but for the past 16 years, I lived in Southern California, where we didn't have any immediate family. And so we would always host an orphan's Thanksgiving because there happened to be a lot of people in our neighborhood in particular, and people that we worked with who also were transplants and they didn't have local family. And so everyone would come over. So here we have the situation where everyone who's coming over to our house, they know us, but they don't necessarily know each other because I work with these people, or our kids go to school with these people, or these people live in our neighborhood. And so part of the job as the hostess and the host, since everyone knew my husband and I, we would walk around and we know everyone's interests and activities and family situations. So we would bring people together who had similar crossover interests or family situations. And we would say, hey, Joe, this is John. He's into mountain biking too. You guys should get together and talk about the trails around here. There's such a great trail system. What are your favorite spots? And we'd get that conversation going. And then we'd walk away and start a conversation between Sarah and Summer. Hey, you guys both have junior high kids. What kind of sports are you? Oh, you're playing soccer? Oh, they're playing soccer too. What kind of leagues are you liking? What kind of travel teams are you doing? You get that conversation going and you walk away. This is the same thing that you have to do on site. You have to know your residents. What's interesting to them? What is their background? What's their favorite team? Where do they like to travel? And so then when you're personally inviting people to your event, you are the host, you are the hostess, and you're walking around saying, hey, Bob, you need to come over and meet Jim. You guys both are the biggest Dallas Cowboy fans I have ever met, and get them talking about who was, brought on this year and who's injured this year and whatever. And then you can walk away and start another conversation, but it has to start with you, absolutely. I know a lot of times we focus on social media. That's been a big topic over the last several years. And what's interesting is that while social media can be helpful, the personal face-to-face interaction matters more. And while we focus a lot of time on and attention on social media, the reality is only about 20% of our residents are following our communities on Facebook. And when it comes to Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, those numbers plummet down to 2 or 3% at the most. Now, even though they might not be following you, they haven't clicked the like button or the follow button, the thing is, they're still there. They're lurking. Our residents are total lurkers. So they're watching what you're posting, they're scrolling, judging, they're there and looking. So be very thoughtful about the things that you're posting online. It shouldn't be about reminders that the rent is late. It should be, oh my gosh, Jan won the pie baking contest on Friday, and you can post the picture of Jan with her pie and everyone around her going, yay, Jan. Those types of things where people can see the interaction, they can see the event, they can see the connection, and maybe they'll be like, you know what, I bet my pie is better than Jan's, and I'm going to show them next year. So those types of things to keep them engaged, even if they're not necessarily following. So use social media to complement those events that you're already doing. And I think Beth has some great examples of how team are bringing all of those components together.
Okay, so I know that we have such a diverse group that's listening in today, so forgive me if you feel like I'm talking below you, but I just wanted to give you a couple of examples of how we use resident events, some budgets, how we're managing the process, just so you can take that with you and host your own events. So we're giving you the secret sauce. So our first example is for Aria Millennia, which is in Orlando, Florida. So this community, when we did our last demographic study, has our youngest residents, so they're mostly millennial. They have a lower rent-to-income ratio than most, higher rent-to-income ratio than most of our other communities. So we make sure to tailor our events to that specific resident. For this event, we had a $300 budget. We try to host about 3 events a month for our residents, and that would not include something like the garden club or something like that that we're doing outside of it. This would be 3 budgeted events. At ARIA, we do have a CARES team, which is really helpful. I know Jen mentioned that when you're hosting an event, you are the host, and our management team is part of that, but having the CARES team on board is really nice because then they're the host, and we can just be there to kind of build rapport and work together to host that event. So this specific event was a Cinco de Mayo event. It was a nacho bar and a margarita bar. So who can say no to that, right? We had 50 residents come, which is a really great attendance since, keep in mind, all of these communities are in different stages of lease up. So this was a month ago, and to give you an idea, we were only, I think, 85% occupied as of yesterday. So at that point, we were probably 70% occupied. So maybe only 200 residents total. So it was a great hit. You can see our manager there has her LMC Pride shirt on. And now, while Jen mentioned that people may not be following you on social, but they're definitely lurking, one of the things that we say here is if you didn't catch any photos of the event, it's like a tree that falls in the forest. Like, did it really happen? I don't know. So we also take the opportunity to take a lot of photos and capture content at these events that we can repurpose for our social media channels as content. So that's, as a marketing person, really important to me because it comes off as very local, authentic content, and it features the associates that they'll meet when they come to the community. So we can skip to the next one. So our next example is a very boutique community in Hollywood, California. So this community is only 73 total apartment homes, so it's a tiny little building, but they have a great sense of community. They have really great amenity spaces for being such a small building. So this event we hosted on the rooftop deck. We have 2 rooftop decks at this community, one for the pool and one is a nice barbecue area, sitting area, and there's a pet park out there too. So for this event, we had a larger budget. It is Hollywood. The rents are crazy high there. So a $100 budget is not going to impress a Hollywood resident, but a $450 budget for this one. We do not have a CARES team at this community because it's such a small community. So it's hosted by our leasing team, and our leasing team is really only 2 people, and then our service team participates as well. So our leasing team hosted this barbecue on the rooftop deck. We had 30 people attend. Again, this is a lease-up community, so if you do the math on 73 apartments, it was really about half of our residents attended. So it was a really well-attended event. Everybody had a great time. I visited this community, I guess it was 3 weeks ago, and it was awesome. The residents all know each other. They're calling each other. They're hollering at each other in the breezeways. So they've done a really good job of connecting these residents and making events that people will actually attend. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so this community is another one that's in Lisa. It's Indigo BCS in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I was just there last week. It's looking great. This community has a very transit-oriented resident base. So it's right on the airport. It's also right on the train. So you can get to downtown on the train. You can pop over to the airport, one stop on the train. So we have a lot of people that either travel a lot or work for some kind of travel industry or have just moved to Minneapolis. So it was really important for us to build a sense of community there. This is a bigger community. It's about 300 apartments. They did not have a CARES team at the time that we hosted this event because it was clearly very early in the lease up since it's Mardi Gras party that was actually hosted at Mardi Gras. But we had 50 people attend this event, and they really just did light appetizers, drinks, and hung out in the club room, which, I mean, it was a huge hit, and we had a lot of people attend. They were still talking about it last week when I was out there, so it's really good. But this is another building where we have great amenities, but we also have people that go out and use the amenity spaces. So if you have amenity spaces, leverage those, have parties in them, show residents how to use them so that when you're not around, they can meet their friends down there like they would at a dog park. You can go to the next slide. CREST Oak Park is here at Dallas, and they do a good job, clearly, of collecting the content for our social media pages, but they have a very small building. It's 180 apartments, but our community areas were smaller until we had a park. We just opened a giant park. But up until then, they really only had their club room, and you can see it's so tiny. There's all those people just crammed into the lobby. But their events were really well attended. So we asked them what they want to do. We even went as far to as to survey them when we opened our park. So we have a very large private park in the middle of that community. And recently we put a survey out to all of the residents saying, hey, this is a fenced-in park. Would you like it to be off leash for pets sometimes? Because it's not a pet park, it's a park. So we did a survey to find out what hours people would like it to be off leash and what hours they would prefer to have it on leash. So we're really drilling in to find out what our residents want so that they'll be happy there, right? Also, all the people that want their dogs to go run it out with other dogs know that, hey, there's pet park hours, off leash hours from, 8 to 9 in the morning. I should go out at 8 to 9 in the morning so that my dog can run around with all the other dogs. So this community's done a really good job of dialing in to what their people want. And then CREST at Las Colinas Station is a super diverse demographic. We have like any kind of person lives there, literally. And I never say that. I know that's a line you're not even supposed to say. So everybody lives there though. It's so diverse. There's nothing specific that's drawing them. We've got a variety of major employers. They're close-ish to the airport. But there's not one trend that really ties them all together. Like they have some families, they have some young adults, they have some people moving from out of country, they have some people that have lived in Irving their whole lives. So it's a really good mix of people. So we want to make sure that we're appealing to as many of those people as possible. And one thing that's consistent across all of those different demographic groups and personas is pet lovers, right? You can be a pet lover and be anybody. So for Halloween last year, again, they had like no people living there. They're still not totally leased up. So we did a Halloween party where dogs dressed up, and we did a contest for the cutest dog costume. And you can see they're so freaking adorable, those little mutts all dressed up. But we had a great attendance to that, and it drew all those different people out to a resident event. Park House is a really unique one. They are in Thornton, Colorado. And so in Thornton, it's a suburb of Denver, and it's pretty far outside of Denver. The community literally backs up to like a field where horses live. But we have a lot of families out there because they have a great school district. And so we want to make sure that a lot of our events are including the kids. You can see pictures from their Valentine's party. All of the little kiddos that came to the party got a sweetheart with their name on it. How cute is that? So we have a lot of events that are family-centric events. You can either bring your kids or it's actually an event hosted for kiddos. They also have a good fitness component to their events because I'm sure anybody that knows Denver knows they're pretty fit up there. So we do some fitness classes, we do some, you know, different outdoor activities. This is also one that has one of the community gardens. So I think it's really important when you're hosting your events to either ask your residents, if you have a pool of residents, ask them what they want to do, or, you know, host events that you feel like will be well suited to your resident demographic. And then when they're attending the events, ask what they want to do next time, right? So I feel like you definitely need to work on having a sizable resident event budget for the year. $100 a month is going to be really hard to pull together community events. You can do it. I mean, you can make it work, but it's going to be difficult for your team to host a well-attended event for less than about $200 an event if you're doing food and drink. So keep that in mind. Okay, so takeaways. Is this going back to you, Kylie?
Yeah, so just real quick, because I know we're out of time. So the last, at least we each have a little bit of a takeaway. So one, connection matters. You know, from our view, just all the stats that were presented, we obviously know culture of connectedness is really big. So just that we know that it's important to help our residents to be happy and healthier, but it's also a great business decision for us as apartment managers and owners.
Second takeaway, community begins with you. So Jen hit on this a little bit before, but we need to really think of ourselves as the hosts and really get that community started. Our leasing people get to know our residents before they come to move in during the leasing process, but then we need to be connecting them with other people to build that sense of community.
And finally, this is an apartment revolution. We have to think beyond the features, the amenities, the services, and we have to really look at our residents as part of the selling value and the selling factor. And so focusing on those relationships. And not only is it just the right thing to do, and it's good for people, but to Beth's point earlier, and to Kylie's point earlier, it's going to reduce the amount of work you have because you care about what you know about. But they have to know each other first before they care. And then when that spaghetti falls, it's going to be okay, or it's going to be easier to deal with.
Well, we ran just a little bit over, but I think you all did a really great job at covering things really thoroughly. First of all, making a point of how much community connection matters, showing some really compelling statistics that sort of break it down in a bunch of different ways to help you understand, and then some really great solutions to sort of help generate that connectedness. That's something that's important to all of us, whether we're extroverts or introverts. Thanks to Beth Tuttle, Jen Picotti, and Kylie Hote, all of you for taking extra time and rebroadcasting your content and sharing it with our wider audience today. I really appreciate all of you very much, and I learned a lot listening in. I just wanted to remind everybody that we will, this has been recorded. We will share the recording via a follow-up email. There will be a link in that email, and you can, you'll be able to dial back in and sort of get back at all the details that you want to share. And that concludes our webinar. We hope you'll consider joining us in California and San Diego, June 13th to the 16th in 2018. Take care, everybody, and have a great afternoon. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.